With a single headline, I can make or break a resident's belief in their city council, their school board, their neighborhood, or the fundamental reason they moved to a community.
They're like animals, and I slaughtered them like animals. I hate them.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Hope you enjoyed that little montage I put together there at the beginning. Little, perhaps off color, though hopefully entertaining anti-journalist propaganda. No, Anakin, indeed. So, thanks for joining me, Mr. Patriarch, journalist disrespecter, as you can see in my subheading. So today what we're going to be talking about is a particular article which I think is emblematic of the way journalists think about you, basically. And what they think about is sort of the role of quote unquote civil society and the state and sort of their general frame in this modern age in the West. The article is titled "Children Are Not Property" by Sarah Jones. Subtitle: The Idea That Underlies the Right-Wing Campaign of, quote, parents' rights. So before we begin, if you're new here, please give this channel a sub if you like this content. Like and share the video, all that good stuff. You can support the channel via links to PayPal or Subscribestar in the links below. And I did a good one this time. I advertised almost a week in advance of what I was going to stream instead of an hour before. So that's good. I'm getting back into the proper advertising game. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to share screen and we'll look at this article together. So let me see, share screen. All right. Children are not property, share. Okay. So hopefully you guys can see that. If you guys, okay. Yeah. Okay, sweet. Very good. So let's begin. And I went through this a bit earlier, I guess maybe last week or earlier in this week. And yeah, it just really got me agitated, but then also I was like, this might be a good case study of sort of how these people think. So anyways, we can already see from the headline, children are not property. So she is advocating that children are not property inside the idea that underlies the right-wing campaign of, quote, parents' rights. So we can already see from the framing of this title that if we look at this right here, children are not property, the main idea here is emancipation. Children are the new civil rights frontier, basically. And yeah, that's just emblematic of everything the regime does, as we all know, as Aron, the good old boys, whoever all point out, the Civil Rights Act is basically the new Constitution of the United States. And she's sort of leaning into this with the children are not property shtick. This is in line with the values of the regime. So, and the idea that underlies the right-wing campaign for, quote, parents' rights. And she puts it in quotes because parents' rights, according to this woman, means ownership and domination and authoritarian structures and garbage like that. So let's get into the article. So, train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it, the book of Proverbs says. To certain right-wing Christians, the concept is simple. A child can be broken or stamped into shape, much like any domesticated animal. So, okay. So already we have an issue here. So again, with the choice of language that this person is using, she's saying that conservatives see their role as parents to break or to stamp their children into shape like domesticated animals. So on the one hand, there is, a grain of truth to this. I think it was Thomas Sowell said that, civilization doesn't happen by chance. It actually takes a lot of work to civilize children and make them into responsible, functioning adults, which is true. But the frame for that is not, the understanding for why that exists is, so far as I can tell, kind of absent from what I read from this article. It's not that we want them to be broken or stamped into shape. It's that, from an Orthodox Christian perspective, which I am mindful of because it is the Easter weekend for us, is that we are entrusted to the care of these children who are ensouled beings created in the image of God. And we have a responsibility to them and to the Lord to raise them in such a way that they will glorify God and lead happy, healthy, prosperous, productive, charitable lives. It's not like we're trying to break a horse to get it to do things for us. And that's the key distinction with the animal analogy that this broad pulls up. So continuing on, though all parents hope they'll pass their values on to their children, for some, that hope is more of a mandate. I would just say this is obvious for any parent. Like whether this woman admits it or not, her values of non-values, if you want to call it that, are a mandate for her if she has children, which is questionable. My own parents believed that Proverbs is the word of God, and they believed, too, that a righteous upbringing would produce an adult in their image. Who can blame them? The idea that a child should replicate her parents does not belong only to conservative Christianity or to religion at all. A proverb is common wisdom, and lately, this one is hard to escape. Authoritarianism is gospel to modern conservatives. Nowhere is that clearer than their assaults on children. Oh my God. So, authoritarianism is the gospel to modern conservatives. Where do you even begin with that? And, I brought up Sowell earlier, but I shall do so again because he made a really good brief point, which is that when you're dealing with an interlocutor such as this, they can just say some bullshit thing like authoritarianism is gospel to modern conservatives. But then in order to debunk that, you have to spend, a paragraph and historic examples citing why that's just nonsense. And this is, of course, why journalists are so dangerous, is because they can literally just say this one sentence, and then it gets pushed out by the media, and any discussion, it's setting the frame of the conversation. It puts out the forward. Authoritarianism is gospel to modern conservatives. But at the same time, the effort it takes to basically deconstruct this statement takes a lot more effort, and it's not going to get pushed like, this is from New York Magazine. And then also, nowhere is that clearer than their assaults on our children. Now, this is framed. This article was written in backlash, if you want to call it that, to people like Matt Walsh and the idea that trans kids are this weird imposition of the managerial state on children. So in our minds, of course, the assault on children is coming from the state and people like this journalist creature, Sarah Jones. We are trying to protect them, and they are the authoritarian ones. Not even authoritarian, totalitarian. The whole ethos of the regime is to create a therapeutic state which manages and engineers and fiddles with every single social interaction through so-called education, public institutions, and culture and media. It's totalizing their vision of, what they want and the means through which they achieve them. Authoritarianism would be nice. Like, that would be nice. We're not dealing with authoritarianism. We're dealing with a totalitarian state which seeks to fundamentally alter humanity beyond what it has ever been. So again, this is the thing. She can just say these two sentences, and then I'll spend like 5 minutes showing you why that's stupid. But the problem is what I say doesn't get any traction, and people don't have the bandwidth to receive it a lot of the times. Anyways, the quote, parental rights movement is not new, but it is enjoying a resurgence. Adherents say they're protecting children from harm, broadly defined, or in this case, pretty narrowly defined. Don't groom our kids. And don't turn them into gender goblins with your propaganda. That's pretty narrow. After an art teacher at a Florida charter school showed students a picture of Michelangelo's David, parental complaints forced out the principal. Okay. Members of Moms for Liberty call for book bans across the country. Books with LGBT content are at special risk of removal. Based. The architects of state bans on gender-affirming care for minors say, falsely, that children are at risk from predatory physicians and activists. So again, this phrase, gender-affirming care, is given, on the one hand, it is seen by people like this as messiance, right? Or that's how it's framed anyways. And the ethos behind it is civil rights. So you have messiance joined with civil rights equals gender-affirming care in their language. Say falsely, it's asserted falsely, that children are at risk of physicians and activists. Well, all you have to do is look at the data that shows the amount of quote-unquote LGBT kids has skyrocketed since, over the past decade. And if it's not because of activists and predatory physicians, then what is it? Oh, it's actually the whole structure of power in the United States. That's what it is. These people, the activists and the predatory physicians, are merely instruments of that regime. So the activists provide the impetus for this stuff to happen. The cult of civil rights and sexual liberation already pre-exists, and these people are just spearheading it and pushing it to the next level. And then you have the physicians who are educated in these institutions, trained by them, who then facilitate the quote-unquote gender-affirming care. A gender cult destroys families, claimed conservative commentator Matt Walsh. The child they held as a baby and raised and gave their lives to and loved and still love becomes suddenly unrecognizable, he said. I would rather be dead than have that happen to my kids. Me too. Unironically, I would literally rather be dead than have either of my sons have this happen to them. Literally would rather be dead. Don't even have to think about it. Like, give me death before this. Easy choice. So, from the article, after quoting Matt Walsh, the real sin isn't that trans youth will suffer, but that parental grip might be loosened. This is just bullshit right here. This is not what parents of kids are concerned about at all. It's not that we're worried about losing our grip. Yes, we are worried about losing our grip to a certain extent by giving it over to people like the disgusting Sarah Jones and infiltrated school boards and whatever. We're worried about them, fueled by their ideology and backed by their mass state apparatus, taking our kids and destroying them. That's what we're worried about. So the real sin isn't that trans youths will suffer, but that parental grip might loosen. No, it's about you destroying our children. That's what it's about. Okay? It's about you turning or attempting to turn vulnerable kids who are going through, the weird hormonal stages of puberty and feeling uncomfortable in their own bodies, and then transforming them into gender goblins. That's what we don't want. We don't want you to literally mutilate, chemically castrate, and psychologically destroy our children. That's actually the concern. It's not that, we just want control for control's sake. It's that we don't trust you people with power over our kids at all. Period. We don't trust you, not that we just want to hold on to power for power's sake. Oh, I'm getting fired up. Conservative interest in the child extends beyond a traditional hostility to LGBT people. Or you could also say every society ever until about 30 years ago, if that. In March, Arkansas Governor Sarah Huckabee Sanders, a Republican, signed a bill into law that makes it easier for companies to hire children under 16 years old. Okay, based. I don't see why this is a problem at all. If kids want to work, let them work. I think I had my first job when I was 13. So I don't get why this is an issue. It's a summer job. More states may follow. Okay. Fine. As Terry Gerstein, the director of Harvard Law School Labor and Work-Life Program State and Local Enforcement, well, that's a mouthful. Terry Gerstein, the director of the Harvard Law School Labor and Work-Life Program State and Local Enforcement Project, God, pick a better name for your program, pointed out in the New York Times. Look at this. New York Times in italics. This is the paper of record. Don't you know? It's in the New York Times. Oh my gosh. New York Times. Bills that would allow 14 and 15-year-olds to work in meatpacking plants and other dangerous jobs in Iowa as part of training programs, and 16 and 17-year-olds to take jobs at construction sites in Minnesota are under consideration. Good. Why is this an issue? Gerstein wrote, noting that the bills coincide with a rise in dangerous child labor violations. Get out of here with your dangerous child labor violations. We don't care. I don't care. Like, my sons will be working during the summer when they're of this age. I will encourage them to do so. I will not make them, but I will encourage them. And if they get employment doing that, that's great. So this is framing Republicans as being dangerous to children because they want to make it easier for them to be employed. If they want to, by the way. This is what this is. This is a stupid Dems versus GOP framing. Look at these Republicans. They say they want to protect kids. They're actually pushing forward legislation, which makes it easier for them to be employed in quote unquote industries that have a rise in dangerous child labor violations. Right here. Nonsense. Not long after Republicans sought to put more children to work in Arkansas, it's not what they're doing. They're seeking to allow children to work in Arkansas. Put more children to work in Arkansas. No, they want to allow children to work in Arkansas. That's what they're doing. All they want to do is to increase their choice. They want to let kids work if they want to. They're not putting them to work. They want to make it easier for them to work if they want to. Republicans in North Dakota killed a bill. Totally different state, by the way. See how they're trying to join these two together? Republicans in North Dakota killed a bill that would have expanded a free lunch program for children from low-income families. Okay. So what sort of program exists? I'm sorry, what sort of programs exist already? That's an actual question to ask. My guess would be fairly substantial ones. Because I can tell you that up here in my state, also a red state, the amount of resources that are available to families of low income is significant. And is probably significant in North Dakota as well. Also, an oil-rich state, by the way, with a lot of money in their coffers. They looked at this proposal, I reckon, and said, this is either redundant or provides unnecessary expense. These kids are getting fed. And if they're not, it's because their parents are criminals and don't sign them up for already existing services. My God. I hate it so much. I can understand kids going hungry, but is that really the problem of the school district? Is that the problem of the state of North Dakota? It's really a problem of parents being negligent with their kids. Yeah. Said State Senator Mike Wabama. His message was clear enough. A hungry child is not a collective responsibility, but a private failing on part of the parents. Okay. So the solution to this is everything within the state, nothing outside the state, nothing against the state, apparently. So this is one of the problems with modern society, which certain strands of leftists have a point with, is that in America and much of the West today, there is a large degree of social alienation and atomization, which has occurred partially due to economic conditions, partially due for an increase of secularization, and partially due with mass immigration. Okay. So it's not any one thing. And what happens is when you do this, a lot of these perpetrated by the state, the federal level, by the way, when you do this, what ends up happening is that the wider social networks, which would step in and assist or provide notification to, let's say, authorities if a parent is being abusive, are no longer there. Each family exists as an island unto itself and is thus exposed to a lot of risk, socially, economically, whatever, which didn't exist before because there was actual communities and people could help each other. Funny how all that went away this century. Like not even that long ago, like less than 100 years ago, this sort of stuff existed and now it's gone. The social capital in a lot of these places is gone. And you have to, this is kind of what we talked about a little bit, I guess, on the last couple of streams, is that, you know, you can recreate this stuff, but you actively have to participate in the creation of it. You can't just take it for granted. You have to find it and help it grow or start it yourself. So a hungry child is not a collective responsibility, but a private failing on the part of the parent. How about both? How about it is a private failing on part of the parent, and we can't necessarily fix all of that, but collective responsibility only exists in community. If you feel no community or attachment to somebody, you're just simply not going to be able to notice the problem, and you're much less inclined to care or fix it just because that's how people are. But if you have people in your own community who are part of an active communal life to some extent, then you feel a responsibility to them. Do I have a responsibility to literally every hungry child in the world? No, I don't. I don't. Because I can't bear that burden. And even if I could, there's no way for me to know, right, who needs help and who doesn't. This is just, again, this managerial thinking. But what I can do is I can be part of a community that has an extended network of people and we can help each other out. I can do that. Or if there is a particular egregious event like the earthquake in Turkey and Syria, where a lot of Orthodox Christians are based, I can help out with the disaster relief. I could do something like that, but I can't alleviate every single problem. Anyways, it's possible to draw a line between Wabima's remarks, the push for child labor, the push to allow child labor, and the right's attacks on trans kids. So I'll read that again. It's possible to draw a line between Wabima's remarks, the push for child labor, and the right's attacks on trans kids. In each case, conservatives betray a conviction that a child is the property of parents. Because parents own their children, they can dispose of the child as they see fit. They can deny them evidence-based medical care. They can put a child to work. They can make sure a child is sheltered from the dangers of a serious education. What serious education? When a child goes hungry, it's because a parent isn't caring for their property. And what a child does with their property and what a person does with their property is their right. Ah, God! I hate it. I hate it so much. First off, laws on child abuse and neglect exist throughout the United States. If you are not feeding your child, that is child abuse. We cannot live with these people. No, we can't. No, we can't. If you cannot take care of your child and neglect to provide them food, that is illegal everywhere. Okay? And you will have your kids taken away from you if you cannot feed them. Simple as. Because that is, along with physical safety, nourishment, is like parental care number one. You are a failure as a human being and as a parent if you can't feed your kids. Okay? And there exists many programs all across the U.S. which make sure that that doesn't happen. So she's equivocating all these things. So we have Wabama's remarks, again, maybe taken out of context. We don't know what he said. Classic journalist move. The push for child labor, again, kids have always worked throughout history. If they want to work, let them work. It's not a problem. And the rights attacks on trans kids. So to this creature, it's all about control. The language she's talking about, how conservatives see their parents, is literally the same language that like abolitionists talked about how masters saw their slaves. It's literally the same thing. And this is why we need to get over the cult of civil rights. We need to get over it. Now, it's impossible in the current paradigm. I don't think we can just ignore it. But at some point, if we're ever to progress as a country, just maintain some semblance of sanity and competence, like we need to get over this cult of civil rights. It is literally destroying us. God. Deny them evidence-based medical care. It's a nice way of saying cutting my son's genitals off. Or denying them puberty. All right. Like any piece of property, a child has value to conservative activists. Nothing to say about how we view children as ensouled beings with dignity, created in the image of God, who do not deserve to be chemically castrated. Oh. Like any piece, this is getting hard for me to read, guys. Like I am getting mad reading this. But I think it's important to understand kind of the mindset of what we're up against. And I'll have some comments on this by the end. Like any piece of property, a child has value to conservative activists. They are key to a future the conservatives want to win. Yes, like anybody wants to win. You need kids because kids are literally the future. Parental rights are merely one path to the total capture of state power and the imposition of an authoritarian hierarchy on us all. Oh, now it does no good for me to point out hierarchy, hypocrisy. We know this. It's not hypocrisy, it's hierarchy, as Aaron McIntyre likes to say. But literally, this is what they're doing to us. Just replace parental rights with trans kids' rights or trans rights or whatever, or progressive rights or progressive values. Just reread this. Progressive value with progressive values. Progressive values are merely one path to the total capture of state power and the imposition of an authoritarian hierarchy on us all. Yes, that is literally what they're doing. The left always projects. The left always projects. The left always projects. Vox Day was right. So it's no surprise that children have long been a fixation of the right wing. The late Christian Reconstructionist R.J. Rushdoony was a prominent advocate of Christian homeschooling in the 60s through the 80s. Based, very right. To Rushdoony, all education was religious. He is correct. He was correct. Rushdoony was 100% correct. All education is religious. It is inevitably infused with the values of the educators and whatever paradigm they are using. All education is religious. 100% correct. To Rushdoony, all education was religious, as Dr. Clint Heacock observed in a 2021 piece for Public Eye magazine. So-called government schools are churches in their own right. Yes. Yes. Rushdoony believed. Indoctrinating students in the religion of secular humanism. Yes. Yes. He thought, now there are, of course, degrees of this. So if you are in a red district, you can get away with avoiding some of the secular humanism. But R. McIntyre, some time ago, he said, yeah, this idea that school boards can just teach whatever they want is actually incorrect, because there is state regulation which prevents certain things from being taught, largely, again, influenced by the Civil Rights Act, but also standards set out for curriculum from the state level. So what is defined as good education is identified and targeted by the state government, trickled down, and then is enforced at the county or school district borough level. Okay. So that's reality. Now, you can't get around this a little bit, but I mean, does anyone doubt that schools exist to indoctrinate students in the religion of secular humanism? Like, to a certain extent, that is obviously correct. You have some places where this is more obvious than others, but it's pretty clear that in a lot of the country, this is exactly what's happening. Okay. So, where was I? He thought parents ought to be solely responsible for the care and education of their children instead of relinquishing them to an anti-Christian state. That sounds pretty good. But again, solely responsible. This again assumes that the parents are acting independently. So ideally, and hopefully, which still exists to a certain extent among conservative Christians, is a real sense of community. They are not solely responsible. They are primarily responsible. And then the community enforces social norms and values through the religious institution. And then the parent is charged with the stewardship of this child given to them by God. All right, so I'll start this again. So he thought parents ought to be solely responsible for the care and education of their children instead of relinquishing them to an anti-Christian state. That fear of state influence and belief in total parental control isn't limited to Rushdoony. Okay. That fear of state influence and belief in total parental control. Again, total inversion. What people like Sarah Jones believes is total state control and or total state influence, rather. They would put it that way. Like, we are just protecting the rights of kids. And because of that, wherever there is a bigot, there is a threat to rights, and we need to stamp it out. And to do that, we need more power and resources. At Salon, the journalist Catherine Joyce reported that Michael Farris, a Trump ally who is the former president of the Alliance Defending Freedom and the founder of the Homeschool Legal Defense Association, launched a parental rights nonprofit in the late aughts that sought to amend the Constitution to read, "The liberty of parents to direct the upbringing, education, and care of their children is a fundamental right." Well, yeah. Farris also objected strenuously to the UN Convention on the Rights of Children, which the U.S. still hasn't ratified. As if that's a bad thing. I don't even know what the U.S. Or the UN ratification on the rights of children is, but I guarantee it's either redundant, not important, or nefarious. By the way, if any of you guys have a comment you'd like me to read or something, you are free to send super fats. Those are always appreciated. I haven't really been looking at the chat. I've been looking at this article. But if you want to send something, leave a comment or just support the show, super chats are greatly appreciated. So continuing on. So again, this is just more U.S. bashing for not getting with the program with international institutions, basically. But the U.S. doesn't really need to because it controls these international institutions to a large extent. So who's going to enforce it upon the United States itself? No. This is how power works. In his mind, the treaty threatened the parents' right to homeschool and the use of corporal punishment. Okay. Good reason not to sign. No intermediary may come between parents and their property. I hate it. I hate it. This is how she sees it. All right. I'm going to save that for how much more of this is there? Okay. There's a few more paragraphs. Okay. So again, more slave-master relationship language here. Here we go. Taken to extremes, the concept of parental rights can be dangerous and even deadly for children. Proponents, like Farris and Rushdoony before him, ignore the basic fact that the home is often no refuge, but a place of domination and abuse, particularly in houses with unwed parents, single moms, kids who have step parents, people who are not were not wed before having children, people who do not maintain clear religious convictions and regularly attend churches. Yes, these people over-index in these things. But again, what's the solution to this? The National Children's Alliance says that over 600,000 children were documented victims of abuse and neglect in 2020. Yes. 77% of substantiated cases, a parent committed the abuse. Okay, define parent. Like, are we talking about a mom, a dad, or again, one of these other a primary caregiver figure. I'm not so sure. The language of parental rights has become a license to torture. Oh my God. Look at this framing. The language of parental rights has become a license to torture. The language of parental rights has become a license to torture. Absolutely incredible dishonesty and lack of self-awareness from this creature. As it did in the case of 13-year-old Hannah Grace Rose Williams. In 2011, officials found her face down, naked and emaciated in the backyard, the New York Times reported. An investigation later reported malnutrition and hypothermia as causes of her death. Here we go. Her adoptive parents, what did I say? Not biological parents. Children are much more likely to be abused when they are not with their biological parents, period, always. Her adoptive parents, Larry and Carrie Williams, were reportedly followers of Michael and Debbie Pearl and their book, To Train Up a Child. The book, named for that verse in Proverbs, urges corporal punishment with a switch and says that a little fasting is good training. But by the time of the Times report, 3 children, including Williams, had died in homes with the Pearls book on their shelves. The Williams parents are now serving decades in prison for the girl's murder. Okay, so we have one sad case of a girl who died from malnutrition and hypothermia. And because of that, we need to take away parental authority. Don't you care about kids, you dumb conservatives? Look at what happened. If only we had passed a law, this could be avoided. If only we had more power, this could be avoided. Absolutely disgusting. And I guarantee there were laws against this sort of thing already, which is why Larry and Carrie Williams will likely spend the rest of their lives in prison. It's because what they were doing was illegal anyways, okay? And in any sane, just society, they would be behind bars, which they are, as it turns out. So again, what does more legislation and taking more authority away from parents and investing it in the state do to prevent this? No answer. It's just, we need to do something. I hate them. I hate them. Let's see it again. I want to see it again. I hate them.
With a single headline, I can make or break a resident's belief in their city council, their school board, their neighborhood, or the fundamental reason they moved to a community.
They're like animals, and I slaughter them like animals. I hate them.
Okay, feel a little better. Feel catharsis. Yes, I agree. All right. Continuing on. State law passed by conservative Republicans have made LGBTQ children, again, assuming that such a thing exists, in particular, more vulnerable to abuse at home by practically requiring schools to out them to their parents. Hey, your kid is having like some gender dysphoria issues. maybe you can help your kid with this stuff. Thanks for telling me. I will immediately pull them out of school. I mean, or I'll get them to talk to a psychologist, or I'll take away their phone for TikTok. Like telling a parent that their kid is going through some weird sexual identity hangups is probably a good thing. Like as a parent, I would want to know. But if I didn't know, that's more of an indictment on me. And this is, again, a lot of parents, to be honest, are just phoning it in. They're not really as invested in their kids as they should be. It's just, I mean, they're content to make them wards of the state, essentially. So the denial of gender-affirming care is another act of violence. No, it isn't. That's all I can say. No, it isn't. It's an act of violence to deny gender-affirming care to a minor. My God. Like animals. Far-right activists invent tales of wanton surgeries on minors and irreversible hormone treatments. Irreversible hormone treatments are a real thing, by the way. Like this happens. In doing so, they obscure the high suicide rate among LGBT youth who need gender-affirming care as a matter of life and death. Well, what are the suicide rates of so-called LGBT youth who do get gender-affirming care? Sarah? You want to tell me that? You want to tell me what the suicide rate of LGBT youth is who do get gender-affirming care? It's pretty high, in case you didn't know. So it doesn't seem that the quote-unquote gender-affirming care is actually helping them all that much. In fact, a lot of them end up dead. I hate it. I hate it so much. Children who work may be exposed to adult dangers like workplace injury or sexual harassment. I wonder how many kids, what proportion of kids are more likely, or which group is more likely to be sexually harassed? Children who attend public school or teens working at Walmart? It's a serious question. Is it more or less safe to go to a urban public school or to work in Walmart? My money is on Walmart. Like, no question. Like, I would be much more uncomfortable spending my days in a high school, public high school, than working at Fred Meyer or Walmart or whatever. May, wiggle word, may be exposed to adult dangers like workplace injury and sexual harassment. Yeah. Because we all know sexual harassment doesn't happen in public schools. In the home and at school, children must also fear gun violence in the name of the Second Amendment. I'm not even going to respond to that. Adults who encourage the proliferation of guns do so knowing well that children will die. They will die. In their hierarchy, the adult right to a gun is worth more than a children's right to live. Not even going to respond to this. This is trash. Reduced to the level of a collectible or a beloved pet, The child is not a person to the right. Okay. Again. Oh. Why do we tolerate these people? I mean, seriously. Why is this woman allowed to have a public opinion? Why? Reduced to the level of a collectible or a beloved pet, the child is not a person to the right. I'm pretty sure that's one of the most dishonest frames I have ever heard. Oh. Only the unborn are spared the right's cruelty. Oh my God. This person is subhuman. Conservatives claim personhood for the fetus, but cannot disobey, who cannot disobey and requires nothing but a womb. The fetus is more valuable than the child because the fetus is a means to an end, the subjugation of women. No comment. It's so tiresome. Once born, a child's value depreciates. The parental right to train the child takes precedence over the child's basic rights. It's defined by you and people like you, by the way. Defined by people like Sarah Jones. They get to define what rights are and then have them imposed through a totalitarian, therapeutic, managerial apparatus called the state. That's reality. There are ways to circumvent a child's established right to an education, as conservatives know. Homeschooling laws are so lax in the US that thousands of children have essentially disappeared into an academic void. Okay. And that doesn't happen in public school, does it? No. A lot of people in public school do just fine. And those are millions of kids, not the thousands that you're pointing out here. Some families don't see the value of education. Okay. And children disappear into the academic void. Okay. Because that's obviously that's obviously worse than going through a public school and getting F's and dropping out and terrorizing other kids and making it hard for them to learn who want to be there. These people do not think in terms of cost or trade-offs at all. They are incapable of it. Even if a child goes to public school, chronic underfunding deprives many children, especially in poor areas, of a sound education. So yeah, it's all that conservatives don't want to give enough money to public schools, which is why Black youth most affected, basically. In much of the country, trans youth aren't treated like people with medical needs, but political targets. Yes, by you. They are the janissaries of the regime. This is ownership. And the US rarely interferes. Okay. There is one exception to the right's belief in absolute parental rule: trans-affirming parents. Oh my God. A defiant parent is a threat to the right. They've stepped out of place and must be subdued. It's because they actually care about kids and don't want them to, undergo this sort of stuff that we've talked about. In this perspective, rights aren't innate. They're determined instead by a person's place in the conservative hierarchy. Yes, 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 yes. As they are today, determined by a person's place in the progressive hierarchy. This is exactly what happens now. Rights are defined by freaking lunatics like Sarah Jones and then imposed through the state on us. Period. That is how it works. That's how it works. Going on, the opposite view that everyone has rights by virtue of their humanity, given by who, established by what, why do we have these rights? Is there a divine source for them? If so, what is that divine source? If there is no divine source, how do you give an account for rights? All that is ignored. They're just spoken into being by freaking lunatics like this broad Sarah Jones. And by the gender goblins who are duped, by the spiteful mutants, by the progressive establishment, by academia. They are spoken into being ex nihilo by, what is called the cathedral. I don't like that word very much, but you know what I mean. The opposite view that everyone has rights by virtue of their humanity requires us to change the way we commonly think of children. Liberals aren't immune. So this is the bone that she's going to throw us at the end. So she could say she's fair and balanced, just like Fox News. Liberals aren't immune to the belief that children are property. The mainstream fear-mongering over trans youth tells us that much. Yet combating the power of the parental rights movement, please don't take my kids away, requires an answering conviction in the rights of children. We can see them as people, uniquely vulnerable, yes, but nevertheless people who have independent minds and will develop private lives of their own. There is no way to control a child forever. My parents learned that much. Yeah, they made the mistake of sending you to university is what happened. I hid books from them and discovered different ways of thinking through literature and furtive online searching. In relatively short order, I became an atheist and a socialist, a fate so dire that a former trustee at my evangelical college told me he hoped my parents died before they knew the truth. They did not share his sentiment. Oh my God. If my example means anything, it's this. Children are not dogs to train, but adults in formation. They will learn someday soon that the future belongs to them. What they do with that knowledge matters to everyone. Children aren't private property then, but a public responsibility. No, children are a public good. They're a public commodity to be shaped by people like you and people who think like you to get the outcomes you want for your bullshit human rights, which you speak into being through your atheistic socialist reasoning, and we have to live with the consequences. That's the world as it exists, and it's the one you want, by the way. But this, all right, I'll continue. We'll finish. To expand our democratic project to children is to grant them the security the right seeks to deny them. Grant them security of education, healthcare, shelter, food. A better America begins with the child. Okay. So it's been an hour and 8 minutes. I have not yelled too much. I'm going to put some closing thoughts on this. So what we see here is a perfect example, and the reason why I wanted to go through this article and do a stream on it is we see a perfect textbook example of how progressives view the world, their place in the world, and human beings more generally. So going back to the beginning of this whole thing is framed around the language of emancipation against oppressive religious institutions, meta-narratives, grand meta-narratives, right? It's all about power. So it's a bit of a postmodernist take here. It's about emancipation from constraint versus parents who, if they are traditionally minded, are framed as viewing their kids as property and engaging on an assault on children. Okay? And kids are the new civil rights client group, or hope to be by this person. They are a new potential civil rights client group who is to be liberated from slavery and oppression by their parents. And wherever there is inequality or differing values against the regime, this is literally oppression and violence, according to this woman, which needs to be resisted by an ever-expanding totalitarian managerial state infused with progressive so-called values. And anything which stands against total liberation is a danger as a bastion of power outside the state, and it needs to be identified and destroyed and defanged or co-opted or whatever it takes to make these outside bastions of power outside of this regime, which Sarah Jones is a fan of, they must be eliminated. And this is why the left is inherently totalitarian. It's always been a totalitarian project, because the only way you get the outcomes that you want as a progressive is if you have total managerial control over society to engineer the outcomes you want and expunge and persecute the what minor bastions of power still exist beyond your control. That's really what this is. And this is why these people need to be resisted at all costs. It is a power struggle, and they're winning. But this is something that Dave, the distributist, talks about, and he's 100% right about this. The left doesn't do victory laps when they win. Listen to the tone of this article. I mean, we went through the whole thing. The tone is one of basically like, we are Mordor. People like you and I are Mordor. And we're coming in to wreck the established order, to turn children into property and have them die in factory accidents and take away their school lunches and make them property of authoritarian parents. And this is literally around the corner. This is how she sees reality, when the truth is the exact opposite. It's the exact opposite of that. But this is how they see things. And this is one of the reasons why they win. They are not satisfied with civil rights 1.0. They are not satisfied with civil rights 2.0. They will not be satisfied with civil rights 3.0. They will push this perpetual revolution as far as they can until the wheels literally fall off and we are left scrambling for sustenance and safety in the ashes of civilization, wondering what the hell happened. And people like Sarah Jones will say, it's because we didn't try enough. That's literally what she'll say if it comes to that. So I hope you've learned some valuable lessons here. Yes, it's dishonest. Yes, they are very good at framing. They control the frame because this is what goes in throughout the media. This is why journalists are so dangerous. This is why the media, despite not being profitable or very particularly profitable, is as valuable as it is. This is why Elon Musk bought Twitter at a loss, is because he knows that ideas are permeated and then pushed out from these places, which affect the wider culture. And we have to do something about it. And I think the only way that we can is to basically work to build wealth, power, and influence based on traditional Christian values and real life communities to sort of hedge against this sort of Leviathan state as best as we can. Because at the federal level, the only way to untie the Gordian knot is to slice it in half, which is a dangerous place to be in, but that's kind of where we are. I don't know what's going to happen in the future, but I do know that we can't just sit around and do nothing. But it's important to understand our enemies. Make no mistake about it. People like Sarah Jones and her class are our enemies. Like existentially. Like if she wins, like society isn't even worth preserving anymore. You won't have a society. You'll have a soulless blob of humanity which has ceased to live historically as a discrete people and is extinct and godless and, being replaced and all that sort of stuff. But this is it. So understand their frame game, understand the projection, understand that they see you as an existential threat, understand that they see you as authoritarian and cruel, and you're not just wanting that you see your kids as property. They think you have this gross materialistic mindset that they do, that you see kids as slaves to be, slaves to be submitted to your will and done with as you please, that they're the underdogs, you're the big bad guy, and they'll do whatever they can to defeat you. And it's never enough. That's these people. So, hope you enjoyed this video. It's been fun. I think I'm going to end it here. Keep it under an hour, 20 minutes. Thanks for tuning in. We had a good crowd tonight. And yeah, I can see that the advertising in advance worked out good. And I think I'll end it with this comment from Kit Spiken. They don't understand love. That's actually it. They don't understand the love that a parent has for their child and what that means and why they love them and the responsibility that they feel to that child and how they execute that responsibility. They don't understand it. Anyways, if you enjoyed this, please give the video a like. Please share this one around. I think this video was this went well. I enjoyed it, and I'd like other people to see it. Spread it on the social media, and I'll talk to you guys next time when I do my next video. I'll also try to broadcast that in advance, or telegraph that in advance so you guys know what's coming. Till then, have a blessed Pascha. Christ is risen. Christ is among us. I guess I say Christ is risen tonight at midnight. And I'll talk to you guys next time. Patriarch.